Okay, continuing on, now we are at Carson Pass in the Sierra. Beautiful area to go hiking when you can do that again. And we're not going to learn this, it's a pretty plant. This is the Sierra Primrose, Primula subfrutescens, which is in the Primulaceae, which is also the family and the genus that shooting stars are in now. You may be familiar with that. Shooting stars used to be in the genus Decathion, and now it's been put into primula with these, and they look nothing alike, but very pretty. And let's go on to a family that you really need to learn. I think Hannah's going to be excited about this. This is the Ericaceae, or the heath family, and the heath family, I'm going to talk about that first. This is happens to be manzanita, which we'll get to in just a moment. The heath family has everything from non-woody perennials to shrubs and trees. In the ones that are woody, oftentimes the bark is peely, and we'll look at one in which that's true. The limpsels, the leaves are simple, and they are either evergreen or deciduous, but often leathery, especially in the ones that are evergreen. The flowers vary quite a bit. In most of these, they have radial symmetry, but there are some bilateral symmetry ones. You may know rhododendron, and azalea, those are in this family, and those are definitely bilaterally symmetrical. But we're going to have 4 to 5 sepals that are free, 4 to 5 petals that are either free or fused, and depending if you have 4 or 5, you have 8 or 10 stamens. The stamens are really cute. They open by pores oftentimes. They have awns that point backwards, so it's unfortunate that we didn't get a chance to look at those in class. The ovary position varies from superior to inferior, and because of that, in part, the fruit varies from a capsule to a drupe or berry. It's often divided into subfamilies because there's some very different ways of living, but those really are not at this point thought to be monophyletic groups. But we have some that are going to be non-photosynthetic and parasitic by a fungus on another plant, so there's a fungal intermediary. There are some that are herbs, and then there's some that are woody. And so we're going to start out with one that is woody. This is manzanita, means little apple, and you'll see the fruits in a moment. Arctostaphylos is the genus. Now, I wanted to show you this. This is not the greatest picture, but you can see the red of it. Here's this evergreen one, and there's some dead parts there. Here you can see the peely red bark, which is characteristic of it. So let's talk about Arctostaphylos, which means bear berry. Arctos for bear, and the staphylos refers to berries. Well, the fruits are actually drupes, but they look berry-like. All right. So we have shrubs, trees. It's definitely woody. There are some that are prostrate, ground-hugging, but many of them are shrubs and erect. The old stems may be more or less red and peeling, because some of them don't do that. Some of them are smooth and grayish, and they may have a basal burl, B-U-R-L. What that is that if you follow the base down, if it's not a bunch of leaves down there, you'd see it widen out at the bottom, and that's actually a collection of dormant buds that, if a fire goes through, those that have those burls can resprout using the existing root system. So it's a very quick way of recovering from a fire. In the genus, we also have alternate evergreen leaves. This is an evergreen plant. And the inflorescence is either a terminal raceme or branched raceme, so a panicle. Let's go to this one. Usually we have 5 tiny little free sepals. Those are the sepals right there, those little points. And the petals are definitely connate, same number of sepals. So if you have 5 sepals, you're going to have 5 petals. We're going to have 10 stamens. And notice the anthers are not sticking out. They're included, not exerted. And again, these have those really cute stamens with the awns on the anthers, but we can't see them. We're going to have a superior ovary, It's going to form a drupe that has, instead of one stone inside, 2 to 10 free or somewhat fused stones. It's a little bit unusual kind of a drupe. And so this is one of 3 Arctostaphylos that you will find in the Sierra. If you hear that ring, I'm sorry, that's my email is still on. But there's many different species of Arctostaphylos in California, and a lot of these species are very localized. But most of the ones that are really localized are on the coast or Southern California or Northern California. But in the Sierra, it's not so bad because there's 3 species that you're likely to encounter. There's greenleaf, Arctostaphylos patula, which is both on the western side and the eastern side of the Sierra. There's this one, which is whiteleaf manzanita, Arctostaphylos viscida subspecies viscida. There's a couple other subspecies, but they're more localized and not in northern Sierra. And then there's a pine mat manzanita, which Arctostaphylos nevadensis, subspecies nevadensis, and that one is more or less prostrate on the ground. So we are going to look at this particular species, Arctostaphylos viscida, whiteleaf manzanita. Okay, and I'm really talking about the subspecies viscida because, like I said, the other 2, one is on serpentine and coastal, and one is in southern Sierra. But this Arctostaphylos viscida, subspecies viscida, is one of the most common and wide-ranging manzanitas in California. It's called whiteleaf because you can see this white bloom. It's a waxy covering on both sides of the leaves. The name viscida, viscid means sticky, and that's because the pedicels in the inflorescence are sticky. They have glandular hairs. We do have a panicle. This is a panicle for the inflorescence. This is not one of those plants that has a basal burl. Okay, so it can't resprout after a fire. One of the things when you're keying these out is sometimes they'll tell you to look at both sides of the leaf. Are they the same color or not? This one is the same color on both sides of the leaf. And this is typically found in openings and chaparral and forests, and even though it's in the Sierra Nevada, it's in other areas, such as the Klamath Range and the Cascade Range, and even in the North Coast ranges too. So let's talk a little bit about manzanitas in more general. It occurs in a variety of soils and habitats. It's been called the rock star of shrub diversity because of what I said of the many different species that are in localized areas. But most of them depend on fire for regeneration. They do tend to occur in and sometimes dominate their chaparral because it is fire adapted and it's evergreen. And they can grow on definitely pretty shallow, rocky, and nutrient poor soils. So continuing on with their fire-adapted traits, I already mentioned basal burls, but about a third of the species in California have these dormant buds in a basal burl. It's sometimes hard to see the base of the shrub because oftentimes there's all this leaf litter down there, but you might be able to see how many stems are coming from the base. And if you have a basal burl, usually there'll be a whole bunch of stems from the base. Some don't have those, and if you don't have them, they're obligate seeders, meaning they have to come back after a fire from seeds. So that's slower, but you're going to have more genetic diversity in the populations. And then some hedge their bets. They have a basal burl, and they also make seeds, and those are called facultative seeders. Anyway, it's a very cool plant, and I think we really needed to get that and the rest of the family. Now, here's a very different member of the family. If you are up high enough in the Sierra, you might encounter snow plant, Sarcodes sanguinea. The sanguine part refers to blood because it looks blood red. And it's called snow plant because as the snow drifts are melting, this is generally the first plant you see pop up. It is not green. It is not photosynthetic. So all we're really seeing, this is the inflorescence, and these little things are the flowers. it is tapped by a fungus into another host plant, and it gets all its nutrition from that other host plant. Moving on even farther to some other members of the Ericaceae. This is white heather, a little fuzzy picture, sorry about that. We're up pretty high elevation, so if you're hiking at Carson Pass, you get this when you get, well, shoot, I can't remember the name of the place, but you get up higher, away from the pass, higher into the mountains. And this is Cassiope mertensiana, or white heather. These tiny little bell-shaped flowers, kind of like manzanita, but they're smaller. And the stems are clothed by these tiny leaves. I think you can see it better. Maybe not. Tiny little leaves pressed to the stem. And right next to our white heather, we have Phyllodoce breweri, mountain heather, which has not these bell-shaped flowers, but these open flowers with these stamens that are really, really exerted, sticking out. So it gives you a little bit idea of the difference in the flower morphology. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of any of the rhododendrons that have the bilateral symmetry. Perhaps go and look in the Egyptian or Cal Flora for that. So both of these are high elevation mountain plants. And this is also one. This is called Labrador tea. It is now in rhododendron, but it has radially symmetrical flowers, not bilaterally symmetrical flowers. It's Rhododendron columbianum. Beautiful white flowers with definitely exerted stamens, leathery, fairly large leaves, high elevation. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be called a tea because it is actually toxic. So don't make a tea from this plant. Okay, let's just for fun, let's see. We got columbine here, not a very good picture. And hopefully you recognize this as having sort of typical flower structure for the Polemoniaceae, although it has quite a long tube. This is Ipomopsis tenuituba. It doesn't really have a common name. The genus Ipomopsis is often called, it just went out of my head. Okay, I will think about that for just a moment. Okay, it's often called scarlet gilia. I must admit, I just looked that up, but it's one of my favorite, one of my many favorites. And if you happen to be hiking up by Carson Pass in the future, this beauty is in the Orobanchaceae, and it's a purple owl's, sorry, it's Copeland's owl's clover, but it is purple colored. But don't have to know any of those, and we are going to go to something you do need to know, but I think I'm going to have to start a new PowerPoint because I will run out of time.